All right, welcome to Bigger Than the Game with Deremy and Jose. I'm Deremy Dove. I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, all decked out in his Brooklyn Dodgers gear, Mr. Jose Ruiz. What's going on?
Going on, Deremy? How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. It's World Series time, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah,
I
hell
can't
yeah.
wait. I think we're both in alignment. Obviously, what you're wearing that we don't want the Yankees to win, so let's go
Nah,
Dodgers.
let's go Dodgers. Yeah, this is no, this is my Jackie stuff. I love Jack. Oh, I mean, big fan of Jackie Robinson. I was thinking, I put this on, and I was thinking of the scene in 40-Year-Old Version when it's like, this is a Brooklyn accent. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, that's like one of my favorite scenes all time, man. When he was arguing in the store, that was great. But
That was funny. I forgot about that. But
no, it's a good time of year though, man. Good time of year.
And yeah, I think October, I love October, right? And like
Yeah,
what goes on. But man, earlier this month, and usually I'm on top of these things, but it slipped by. Oc-
slipping.
October 6th was 15th anniversary of 30 for 30, which is crazy that it's been around for 15 years. I remember when it started,
Yeah.
and and one of our first podcast episodes, people can go on our podcast feed and see it. One of our first like 5 episodes was our top 5 favorite 30 for 30s, and that was February of 2020. So there's been so many more to come out
Yeah,
since. So
a whole new volume was out after that.
yeah. Yeah, so what comes to mind, man, when you think of 15 years of 30 for 30?
Yeah, man, like it's funny because I text you this earlier and we've been like hinting throughout all these episodes we've been doing of like redoing another episode for our 30 for 30s and we had a couple of different ideas, but I'm glad this is coming up again because I know for me, I know for you, Deremy, we've talked so much about this, man, like how important these documentaries are to us, man, and for me, it does not feel like 15 years. I'll be straight up. Like it does not feel like that. And I still can remember, like you talked about when they first started, man. And I remember what I loved about them from the jump is the topics that they were talking about, and it was topics that I knew about, you knew about, a lot of sports guys or sports fans knew about, but they were topics that weren't talked a lot about. And that's why I was like all in from the jump. And then, man, right from the start, they were just great.
No, absolutely. I think for you and I have talked about it throughout on our YouTube channel, on our podcast page, how we've always loved documentaries and always loved sports documentaries. And you go back to like the 90s, you had like those HBO documentaries, which I always have a special place in my heart for them
Yeah, me too.
because that's all we had. And then in the end of the century, when ESPN did like the Sports Century countdown, that
So
was like
great.
the greatest thing ever to me.
Yeah, so great.
And I was like, man. And then when they said we're going to keep it going, like they did the top 50, and I'm like, we get more of these, and they're going to be an hour long now. You
Yeah,
couldn't tell me nothing. And now when I watch them, I'm like, oh, they're a little outdated. Like, but they're still
yeah,
good to me. But I'm like, oh, this is, you can tell it's 25 years ago. Like
yeah.
they're a
They're
little
outdated.
outdated. But I still love them. But like they're outdated though. But so this was like this was like jackpot for me when they were going to do these. And like you said, the topics were great, but what I loved was you got these directors, these people with the vision, and they were things that we knew about, but they had a special feel because it was really special to these directors. They
To
either
them. Yep.
from the area or they experienced this time up close, whatever the case may be, but it gave that special feel, and you felt that in these movies.
Yeah, that's such a great point there. I mean, like that's something I honestly didn't even think about. Like, because in the beginning of each one, for the most part, especially early on, they were talking about why they did this documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exactly right, man. A lot of times they were at these games, they went to these colleges. They were in the moment, like we were. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it was just like, or this event, like even like the first episode, with Peter Berg directed that one, and he did, the Wayne Gretzky trade, and and how important that was to him, and as a kid or whatever it was, the King's Ransom, like like he wasn't there, but he was there, like what I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, and it's just you can tell it was so much passion put into the project, and I felt it, and that was why, again, like from the jump, I was hooked, man.
Absolutely, and you're right. Like those early ones, man, they were special, and it was like,
Yeah,
what are they going to do with this thing? Because I was excited, and Bill Simmons, who co-created this, and I was listening. Podcasts still weren't that big of a thing for a lot of people, but they were for me. So I would listen to him interview these directors, like to promote these coming up. So I'm just like, where are we going with these? Because I'm like, this could be something really good. Don't screw it up. And I tell you, the one that really felt different for me, like that was like, okay, like I feel the passion, was the second one. The Band That Wouldn't Die, that Barry Levinson, the Oscar
yeah,
winning director, about the Baltimore Colts and them leaving in the middle of the night in '84, but from the perspective of the people in that band. And I'm like, man, you felt the passion, you felt the
yeah,
heartbreak, and it was just like, this is really cool.
yeah. Again, like the ideas of these episodes, man, like they were just they were topics that I, like, as a sports fan, like thought about, and I was like, man, like they like nobody talks about this stuff,
Right,
like,
right, yep.
and it's like, we could keep going like down volume one, and it's like, the fifth episode is the Len Bias episode, and I knew about Len Bias. Now I wasn't like, this was late '80s, mid to late '80s, so I was still really young, you know what I mean? I knew the story, but it was just like, oh man, like it's so good to like dive into this so much and like hear people talk about how great he was, and like just all of that information that I was getting, that I wanted, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just all there, an hour and a half or whatever how long it was. And then another one for me, Deremy, that was a great one for me, like.
Mm-hmm.
But the one, we were talking about this one earlier, like, you know we talked about like the top 15 that they came out with. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the one that got me, it was the and I know I was talking about it earlier, and I think it's a great, episode, and great documentary. But it's a time in college football that I wish I was like old enough to really like be a part of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the team that you always heard about. And for them to do a documentary on that team, man, I was done. I was hooked.
Well, yeah, the U was good because it also started the tradition that you don't have anymore with the 30 for 30s, but it started that you're going to get a real special one after the Heisman presentation.
Yeah.
So that's what I remember. It was like the Heisman presentation that year, and then it was like following the Heisman,
Yep.
the premiere of the U. And I'm like, I was kind of like, "It's done with the Heisman here. Let's get to the U. I want to see
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
And it was really good because what we had always kind of gotten from people not being in Miami, the U were the bad guys. They were the
Right.
rebels, and you just had them as the villain. And you get a director like Billy Corbin, who's from Miami, a big a Hurricane fan, and really got to the heart of it. And you got a perspective you didn't see. I knew about the riots, like hearing about it, just being a lover of history in Miami from like the late '60s on through the '80s. I never looked at it as intertwined with the football program.
Right.
I didn't know how much. I knew how the opposition hated Miami, the media. I didn't know that the president of the university was dogging them, and like in their own neighborhood, they were getting like in Coral Gables, where the
Yeah.
school was, they
Right.
were getting harassed by the police and stuff. That's something that you couldn't get from like me or you directing it.
Right. Exactly. Like I knew all about the on the field stuff. I knew all about the Jerome Brown and the Penn State stuff. Like I had read about that, heard about that stuff. But yeah, it was like, man, these guys couldn't even drive around in school because they were getting pulled over. They were getting arrested for the pettiest stuff. Like, so all of that stuff, man. Like you said, like we're not going to know about that unless you were there. You know what I'm saying? Like, or you would hear about it from like someone that lived there too. Like, whatever, man. Like, there's like we could do so many documentaries on like Philly sports, or like even like a St. Joseph University, like, you know what I mean, like that we would hear, that we've been hearing about all our lives, all these stories. And it's like, I'm not in Miami, like, you know what I'm saying, like, so I'm not hearing about all these issues, and they were bringing that right to light, man. It was so cool.
No, absolutely. And I, I tell you what, though, there's so many on these because there's so many volumes. But I'm just looking at it, and some of the ones that stick out from like because you go from the U and then you go right to the next one, Winning Time, Reggie Miller versus the Knicks. And I thought, like, yeah, that's cool, but that's something we both lived. We both saw
Yeah,
that live, so
yeah,
that wasn't something that we kind of missed. And I'm like, being close to New York, you heard all the stuff with Reggie, so I'm like, well, what can you do here? But they made it like an opera,
yeah. It
and
was
it was
so
brilliant.
cool.
It was
Yeah,
brilliant, man. And I'm like, that's what I'll give this thing. I love documentaries, and I always wanted to make a documentary or get into that. And I thought all it is like you get the facts, you interview people, you get some footage. From 30 for 30, I've seen so many different creative ways you can make a movie that just
right.
blows my mind that I would have never known if I hadn't been watching these films.
Yeah, it's like the perspectives, they were genius. You know what I mean? Like, and this one was a really good like start of it almost. You know what I mean? Like just because again we were talking about like we were talking about the King's Ransom, where it's like directors living in this moment, and like this is like such a creative idea. Like, all right, how can I make this? Because it's exactly what it was. You know what I mean? Like he was on stage in the biggest arena in the world. You know what I mean? In Madison Square Garden, and with in New York, and it's like how can we combine all of this stuff? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, let's make it seem like he was on Broadway or something. You know what I mean? And then with that episode, what I loved too was the perspective from like Indiana fans. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
and
yeah.
how totally different it was, and how you know, pretty much like I thought it was. You know what I mean? How buttoned up it was, and like it was just so good, man. Like I love how they were interviewing like I can't remember the reporter, like he was like a beat writer or something there in
Yeah.
Indiana, and he was giving his perspective, and I was like, like he sounds so nerdy, like you know what I mean? Like no disrespect, but it's just like it's different, you know what I'm saying? Like in New York and Indiana, but to get their perspective and to see their fans, and I was like, man, this is cool.
Yeah. But it was cool because you watch that and you see that both New York and Indiana love basketball, great
Right,
tradition.
right.
And like that one like montage where like the Indiana people they're naming all their like legends and New York's naming their legends and Indiana's talking about like you drive throughout the whole state and everyone had like a hoop and everyone can shoot. Everyone you have to shoot. And in New York it's like no one can hit a jumper, everyone can
Right,
handle. Like
right.
everyone you better be able to handle, but no one can hit a jump shot. And it was just like but both you can't say one basketball culture is greater than the other. They both love it, but it's so different, and that's what was really cool about that movie too. That's a good point.
Yeah, and then for me, like some of these I obviously lived through, like we talked about, like I've definitely heard about so much, but the first one that I was like really educated and I thought was a great documentary too was The Best That Never Was. And I was like, man, like again, this is a time in college football where I wish, I was watching, you know what I mean? Like and to hear about Marcus Dupree and how great he was and like what could have been with his career and all that. Again, this was a guy that I didn't know about. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I'll be honest, and I was like the best that ever was. Like who the hell is this dude? Like you know what I mean? Like and I was like, all right, but I'm gonna check it out because I know these been great. Like you know what I'm saying? Like and this was towards the end of volume one, so I'm jumping ahead of a lot of great episodes of great documentaries, but for me, that's the one where I was like, man, like I had no idea who this dude was, but I know who he is now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and
Amen.
to get all that information and all those highlights and to hear Barry Switzer talk about him, and well, I know who Barry Switzer is for sure. I know how great Oklahoma was back in the day, and to hear how he talked about him, about his greatness, it's just like, man, like this is this is so awesome, man. It
Nah,
was great. That's one of
that's
my
a great one.
favorites.
That's a really good one. I really did. And you're right. That was one that was very like I almost went into like no knowledge.
Right.
Like
I mean,
I had heard the name and knew he was a great high school running back. I didn't know what happened or how come he didn't make it. Anything like that. I just heard the name. Like you see, list greatest high school football players. I would see his name up there. That's it. But that's a really good point. But for me, when I look at Volume One, I'll remember like the hype I had for that. And I remember where I was coming back from that night. I went to Yankee Stadium to watch a Phillies Yankees game. The late great Roy Halladay was on the mound pitching at Yankee Stadium. It was a World Series rematch, and I just couldn't wait. I'm like, I'm going to miss the original, but they're going to replay it. And this, Jose, showed me a different way of filmmaking. It blew my mind that night, and it showed me the potential of 30 for 30. Where from that moment on, no lie, I was like, you can't just do like this is something greater.
Yeah,
I'm like
I know where you're going with this.
June 17th, 1994, and I think there's been better ones, not many, but there's been better ones
Not many.
since. But that just was like, I'm like, does ESPN know what they got with this series? That's the one that did it for me, where I'm like, I don't know if they know this can be something special. Like, that was just filmmaking that I still can't get out of my mind. And we're almost 15 years from that premiere, and I still think
Right.
about that all the time, Jose.
Yeah, that was really good. You know what I mean? Like that was so good. And I mean, I'm going to say that about a lot of these. And it was hard, like, to kind of pinpoint which I think were the best, whatever. This one is out there. And the thing is, like, I watched it, I really enjoyed it, but I just watched it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I remember we had a conversation about this episode, and you gave me that different perspective that I didn't even pay attention to. I was just so into like these moments and everything that they were talking about, and just kind of like reliving some of this stuff in my mind. Because again, in '94, I was watching all of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and I was just all wrapped up into like what they were talking about, that I had no idea. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't even cross my mind that there was nobody talking in that episode. There was no narration. There was nothing. Like, it was just highlights and clips and clips and clips and clips. And I was just, when you told me that, I was like, holy shit. Like, that's exactly right. Like, you know what I mean? And then I rewatched it again, and I was like, wow. Like, I agree. It blew my mind. It's
Yeah,
genius.
and I've seen other documentaries do that since. And that director, Brett Morgan, that's like a style he kind of does. But I remember I got back, it was midnight, and I'm like, oh, I gotta watch it tomorrow. I'm like, no, I'm gonna watch it. It's coming back on. Man, I was up, I was just like, I'd never seen anything like that. And I
Yeah,
think for people who don't know, now there's so much documentaries, you see it. But for guys like us, you didn't see documentaries like that. You got the PBS docs for
right.
this regular, you got like the HBO docs, like talking narrator and some footage if they had it, and interview
And it's the
subjects.
narrator, it's a voice that you're familiar with, and it's
Yep.
like, all right, like I'm comfortable here. This was not that at all.
And just to make it where at that point, it's 16 years after like June 17th of 94, it makes you feel like you're reliving the day live in the moment.
Yes,
And that's what threw
yes,
me. I'm like, I know what happens, but I'm on the edge of my seat like I don't know what happens. And I know what happened with the Bronco. I know where he goes, but I was
right.
like, who knows? Like, so it's just amazing.
And the thing is, like, we lived through that, and it just reminded me, like, wow, like all this stuff happened on June 17th, like, and it probably June 17th, I was not thinking about all of this stuff going on because I
Right.
probably was wrapped up in OJ stuff,
That's it.
and I didn't totally forgot about the Rangers parade, which is a huge deal in New York. You know what I mean? Like, and then the Knicks, and we talked about all of that stuff, but it's like, man, like, Arnold Palmer, like all that stuff, man. And I was just like, wow, like such a eventful one day in sports history, and he captured it perfectly.
Did a great job, man. Like, so what are some things that stick out to you when you think about like 15 years? Like, because for me, like I saw in the docket, if you haven't seen it, go on ESPN Plus, and you can watch like the 15th anniversary special. It was really good. But one thing, like one little moment, Jose, that they showed in it was how much 30 for 30 is in pop culture. And I
Yeah,
was like, huh? But then you start watching it, and there's all these like clips of people being like, yeah, that night was crazy. That might be a 30 for 30. And I'm like, you do hear that all the time now when a crazy game happens or a crazy sports moment now. A 30 for 30 we made about that one. And I'm like,
yeah.
it is in pop culture everywhere. I didn't even think about it like that. But just like, are you surprised by how big like it has really been in society?
I mean, I am in a way, in the sense that a lot of people are not into, like, not, I don't want to say a lot of people, but like there's people that don't really watch documentaries, you know what I mean? Like, and these are so good, like that, especially early on. People that don't even watch sports will watch them. You know what I mean? Like, I've
Yes.
sat down with Shannon here, and she's like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "Just watch it." Like, and she's like all into it, and that's when you know they're good. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like, but yeah, I think because you hear that all the time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we've had conversations like, dude, that would be such a good T.O. McNabb, such a great 30 for 30. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, like all that stuff, man. Like, it's definitely in pop culture for sure now. Like, I don't know about as much now because they kind of like not been his best, you know what I'm saying, recently. And but in the heyday, yeah, people were talking about him.
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk to you later on about how ESPN has treated 30 for 30 because I
Mm,
have a lot of thoughts, like, in with how they've kind of, at times it seems like, promoted it and loved it, and then at times seems like they try to, like, ESPN it up and, like,
yeah,
do stuff for no reason that don't make any damn sense. Like, you got something good here. Why are you? And I feel like we're at that place now where I'm like, why are you screwing this up? But
yep.
you know what? I want to ask you, because we did our thing, and there's so many things like that have come out 4 years later. What are some of your top 30 for 30s? Because I'm looking at this list here, and they're top 15, and like you said, some of you are so good, but I'm looking at, you see, from Elway to Marino, of about the '83 draft, of
That was good.
Miracles and Men. You have Dream On about the '96 women's team.
That was like a two-parter, right?
That was, or three, might have been
Oh,
even three.
maybe three. Yeah,
And I'm looking at Be Water, the Bruce Lee movie. Then You Don't Know Bo about Bo Jackson. Once Brothers about the Yugoslavian team. Nature Boy about Ric Flair. Bad Boys with the Pistons. The Fab Five. The Price of Gold. Fantastic Lies. June 17th, '94. The Two Escobars. OJ Made America. And then number one, The U. What are your thoughts on, like, that list? And how many of those are, like, would make your top 15?
I would probably say and we've talked about this before. I put OJ Made in America on a different, like, it's not, it doesn't belong here for me. It's just
It
that
just
good.
makes no
Like,
sense, though. How?
yeah,
But if you're going to put it on there, it's got to be number one, right?
right. Oh, absolutely,
How's it
absolutely.
two?
I don't know. I don't know. And the U is good, but it is no. Like, no, I'm not putting. That's why, like, I don't even OJ Made in America. It's like Wayne Gretzky. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're gonna talk about all these guys. We're not even gonna talk about OJ Made in America. I mean, we can talk about it, but that's hands down the best one. But for me, I'll give you a underrated one in my book out of this list. Out of this list, this top 15, I'll probably have one, two, three. If I had a top 15, maybe three on here. Um, maybe, but
And
that's about it.
does that include OJ?
No, OJ's not even on there.
Oh,
That's
okay.
yeah, I don't even, it's just
Okay.
that good. It's in
I was
its own category.
about to say, then that's two.
Then yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah. So no, for me, an underrated one that I love. I watch this probably like every 4 months. Was of Miracles of Men. Like, I loved that. I love that one because like we've been talking about there. I mean, it's like, there's stories that we hear about. We've been hearing about since we grew up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and the Miracle on Ice, huge deal in sports
yeah,
history, huge deal in U.S. history. Like, in my opinion, but you never heard the other side of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was all about Team USA and I'm winning the gold and da 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 da. Like, which is great. It's a great story. We still know some of these players, all of that stuff. But it's so fascinating to me to hear the other side of that. and like the not the gold medal, not when USA beat Sweden, but when they beat Russia, and the USSR, whatever it was, Soviet Army, Red Army, whatever you want to call them, and them going into that and diving into that, and first of all talking about how great that Russian program was, like, well, sports wise, I know everything else is we're leaving that out of it, but like, but how great these players were, and at this time, guys, they were not allowed to play in the NHL for the most part, and because if not, they would have taken over the NHL too. Like, and just for me, like, just hearing that perspective, like, yeah, like, it's such a great story for the United States, but the opposite is not a great story, and how they were looked at for losing to these scrubs. They looked at them like, because they were scrubs. You know what I mean? Like, and that to me was just so. You hear names like Trotriak and all that. I've known them names for a long time, but to see them interviewed, and it was in Russian too, like, which made it even better for me, man. Like, they not speaking English. It's just, I love that episode. So that's like a personal one of mine, for me. And I think the two Escobars is probably, I would put two on, like, after OJ Made in America. I thought the two Escobars was amazing. That story was amazing. Well, the story was tragic, but it's just
No, but it's yeah.
it was done so well. It was like 2 hours long almost, which even better, maybe even longer than that. And I think the other one out of the three, I did like Elway to Marino. I thought that again, like we've been talking about, like how they're framing the documentary and all that. I thought the way they framed that one was pretty cool. So those will be my three out of that top 15,
Yeah.
other than OJ Made in America. What about you, Deremy?
For me, with this top 15, it's interesting. I think the one that we would agree on, the two Escobars, is on a favorite list. It's really good, but it's not high. But just if I'm no bias, it's best. It got to be in the top 5.
Yeah,
Like the two Escobars is phenomenal. And June 17th, we talked about, like, that's on here. But I'm gonna give you one that really hit me. Well, two. I'm gonna give you two of them that hit me. I'm gonna give you Fantastic Lies about the
was
Duke
really good,
lacrosse.
really good,
That's it. I think in my top 5.
really good.
That's maybe the 30 for 30s that I shared. Well, yeah, I didn't share the next one I'm going to give came out later, but I didn't. 30 for 30's kind of been dying out. I didn't
Yeah,
share it with people, but that's like the last of the great era of 30 for 30s to me.
I agree.
Fantastic Lies.
I
And
agree.
like I've shared that with people who don't care about sports at all, and they were hooked, and we had great conversation.
Because that's what, volume 3, right?
I think so.
Yeah, let me just double check. Because I think after volume 3, that's when it starts to go down.
We have Volume 3, and then OJ Made America is like a part of Volume 3, and then it goes downhill.
Yeah, because there's a couple great ones in volume 3.
But I'm gonna give you Fantastic Lies, and then I'm gonna give you Dream On about
Yeah,
the
that was
'96
good.
women's team. I thought it was great, man,
Yeah,
and I think it's too low. I think it should be in the top 10 on like this list. I think that's fitting, and I love if you watch the documentary, what the director said, and us being two men, I'm going to try to say it the right way. I hope, because I'm saying what she said because I agree with her, and it's not a knock. On women's sports. It's a knock on how ESPN has been producing these documentaries on women sports, which is like she didn't want something that was like prissy. She wanted like the grit and the drama and like the griminess of other 30 for 30s. And when she said that, I'm like, yeah, that is what made it different for women's documentaries, sports documentaries on that ESPN. Like they're 9 for 9. Even how they like promote them, they're like real like it's like, oh, it's like they're openly saying it's for girls when like
right.
these stories are great that men and women need to be hearing them about these women athletes here, but they were just marketed strictly for women, and that's cool. Like if you want to bring the women in, but these are stories that both genders need to hear. And when you do it like Dream On, it gets the greatness. It gets people being blunt and honest and upfront and controversial with each other. And they kind of the other ones before it had like the 9 for 9s. They
Yeah,
had like everything's gonna be okay. Everything like they didn't get to the nitty gritty, but Dream On did. So I love Dream On as well.
Yeah, that was good. I remember when it came out, you were like, Jose, you got to watch this. And I was like, all right, I'm going to check it out. And I was like, oh, you were right on
Mm-hmm.
this one. Definitely right. If you haven't watched that, yeah, I think it's a three-parter. Take some time, man. Grab some chips or something, whatever you eat.
I'll say this because you talked about how I pointed something out with June 17th to you. Of Miracles and Men, I liked it. I didn't grasp it and fully appreciate it until I heard you first talk about it. And the way you just talked about it now on this, podcast we're doing, I rewatched it and I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. And,
Yeah,
and I
it's
do
so
think
good.
I'm glad this is probably the one, maybe like I'm so surprised that they did put on here because I
Me
feel like
too.
people overlook it.
Yeah, me too. And again, it's so cool, man. Like, and a lot of these are so cool, but it's again, it's they're giving us different perspectives, which like again, we can go. Let's just talk about that one real quick. Like the huge stories, obviously, Team USA and all that, but we don't even think about what happened before, and I mean with the other side, and it's just really good. So let me ask you, Deremy, out of this top 15, because I know there's a couple on here that we're both like, ugh, and I think I know your answer. What's the one that it's like, what are you talking about? Like,
Well,
why is this even on here?
Be Water is the first one.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's my first
Um,
one too.
Be
I would
Water
say
was
a very disappointing one because we both were hyped for that one,
bro. They
and it
got
was terrible.
outdone. I
Yeah,
thought because I don't even know. Is it Paramount Network now? It used to be Spike TV,
yeah.
but Spike TV. I'll go by what it used to be called. If you can see, I think it's still on YouTube now. They did like the whole I Am series. They did I Am Bruce Lee, and that was amazing. I'm like, that's one of my favorite, like low key underrated docs. I Am Bruce Lee, and then when ESPN's going to do it, I'm like, oh man, now they got like a template and they got more time, more footage. It's going to be great. Man, I literally fell asleep to it. I was up
I
and then I passed out.
I haven't watched the whole thing.
But it was bad.
Yeah, it was terrible. And again, and we talk, and I'm going to keep referencing this, but we've talked about this on the show a bunch of times. But like Volume 4 was very disappointing. They had a couple good episodes, like Dream On's on there. It's a couple I want to talk to you about too. But I think like I'm just calling them season 1 and season 2, like the expectation, and season 3, like the expectation of those 3 volumes and how great, especially 1 and 2 were. It put them it left a mark. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I felt like Volume 1 just got better and better and better. Volume 2 came in, got good, got better and better, better. Season 4, they took a bunch of steps back, and this one here, I was just again because I thought the idea was like, wow, like Bruce Lee, like you don't see a lot of these. You know what I mean? Like this has to be really, really good, and it was just such a dud, man. And Volume 4 had so many duds
Well,
because they had good ideas, but they just did not. They just didn't do a
let's
job.
get into it, right?
Let's do it. Yeah.
About why maybe, we'll take a little detour about why I'm honestly just thinking about it now is I said, the big name who was a part of the beginning, Bill Simmons, he was a co-creator, but him, Connor Shell, and I believe like John Dahl is his name. Like it was like a couple, really like Bill Simmons and Connor Shell. And if you want to hear a good podcast, go James Andrew Miller, who wrote the ESPN Oral History. It's called Origins, and he has like a mini series about ESPN, and he has a 2-parter on 30 for 30, and he interviews everyone, and you get to hear the real history behind 30 for 30. It's really fascinating. And Bill Simmons, a lot of people, if you don't know, was a big personality at ESPN, a podcaster. He was a writer. He even came on air and did NBA Countdown, and he was a huge part of it. And I didn't really quite understand. I'm like, he's the idea guy, I guess, for like creating it, but I'm like, what does he do? And then I know he like
Right.
would watch and like give his opinions, but I do believe Volume 3, a lot of those, even OJ Made in America, he was gone, but he was a part of, even like the ones that were like came out when he first left. He was a part of those ideas and seeing them get lifted off the ground floor. You get to volume 4, he's been gone at this point, and I kind of wonder, you don't have that person or a couple people who really love 30 for 30 from the ESPN like brass, the suits. And I wonder if that why we've kind of been getting shitty movies. Let's be frank,
Yeah.
for the past 5 years from them, in my opinion. Overall, not there's been a few gems, but overall they've been shitty in my opinion.
Yeah, they've and again, I just think what they established, it's not what they're giving us now, and even if you look at the list, right, like in volume 3, let's just say, there are some really, really good episodes on, good movies on there. Like, you got the 85 Bears is on there. That was amazing.
Loved it,
Yeah, me personally, the Four Falls of Buffalo, I love that one too.
of
Like
course.
that was a
Your
favorite
favorite
one of my
football team. Makes
Catholics
sense.
versus convicts.
Disappointing in my opinion.
I mean, but I just like the idea, like again, because people didn't really talk about that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, but they could have done a much, 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 much
Oh yeah,
better
the
job with that.
ideas aren't so bad, I would say later on. The execution is just bad.
Yes, right,
That one
exactly.
stinks, in my opinion.
That could have been so much better,
That's a
so much better.
disappointing movie.
And that magic moment, I thought was very disappointing too. Like
Awful.
with Shaq and Penny and all that. Again, a team that people talk about, but I was like really excited for it. I was like, man, like that was such a fun team, and wonder like they could talk about what really happened between them two. And dud, Doc and Daryl. What are your thoughts on Doc and Daryl?
Disappointing.
See, I like that one.
And the thing is, that was one that I got hyped. That was supposed to be in volume 1. So
Ah,
some of
okay,
these that we see later, they were talked about and hyped up like early on, and then with making, hey, we kind of get it from doing podcasts, but on a bigger scale, production and all that, it gets pushed
yeah,
back and all those things. So that was supposed to be one of the early ones. So I was excited for that for so many years because I'm like, that's brilliant, and I'm not going to say it's as disappointing as the ones we just named, but it was disappointing. I thought it left a lot out, and it kind of was just like, I felt it didn't capture the highs of them well enough. It just got their lows, and
no
that was
pun
like it.
intended.
Yes, no pun intended. Sorry, Doc. Sorry, Daryl. But it just got their lows, and it just was like,
And it stayed there. Like, yeah, I
and it
got
didn't
you.
get like, well, they are, thank God, they're still alive now, and they're like, okay. I didn't get like, even like, I would take a little bit better if you got like a inspiring ending or a happy ending. It was just like low the whole way through,
Yeah.
and so it was just weird. I thought disappointing.
So the
And Judd
piggyback,
Apatow did one. That he
right?
did that one.
Yeah, and he's good. Like
Mm-hmm.
to piggyback off that episode, then or that documentary, I'm going to just put it out there. I'm just going to guess this. Not guess, but we've talked about it. Once Upon a Time in Queens. I know you like that one.
Oh, the 86 Mets. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, that was really good.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the better later ones.
Yeah, that's probably the best later ones with Dream On.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was definitely some duds there, man. Like, so give me, and again, we've talked about it like personally, but give me one, Deremy, or maybe two, like whatever. That you were like, man, I cannot wait for this one, and you were just completely, completely disappointed in.
Oh, that I was disappointed in.
Yeah.
Besides the ones we named, I'm gonna give you the Prince of Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and that's about like the DuPont,
Yeah.
because I remember when that happened,
Yeah. Me too.
and that's very local to us. So when Dave Schultz, the Olympic wrestler, got killed by John DuPont, who his family owned do all that DuPont stuff, that was disappointing. I thought that could have been done better. And remember the Foxcatcher movie came, like
Yeah.
a lot of stuff I didn't like, so that disappointed me big time. And I think Netflix did a movie that wound up being better than that one. Um, I guess I could say Catholics versus Con, but I probably can go. Hold on, I can probably go higher up. to what I think really was disappointing. I felt
I'll give you one while you're,
all right.
scrolling through that.
I can say I thought Catching Hell was a little disappointing. The Bartman one,
Yes. Yes.
like that was a little disappointing. I thought you could have done a little bit more with that. Um, the we did a podcast kind of about it with the steroid with Long,
Yeah, Long Gone Summer.
disappointing as well. So those are a few. Because then there's some that I can say, if I'm honest, answering your question honestly, they were flat. But did I have expectation for them? Not really. Like so like the fantasy sport one from volume 1, I believe, that was kind of like whatever. Muhammad and Larry was kind of like okay, but I didn't have the
Yeah.
highest expectation for it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So that's not too bad. But there's a
Yeah.
few like that.
Yeah, the one later on that I was really disappointed in, and it was just a weird documentary the way they did it, and we talked about it on one of our episodes, like, was the Al Davis one. Like, I was like, man, like,
That's a good point. Yes.
there's so much to talk about when it comes to Al Davis, you know what I mean? Like, in such a long span of time, and his greatness, and what he meant to the NFL, and still, like, his greatness still kind of like hovers the NFL. And it was just weird as shit. Like, it was like a cartoon. Like, I don't know what the hell that was going on there. And
Yeah.
it was just, it was just terrible.
And I like that director. He's
Yeah.
NFL Films. Kenny Rogers. He did the Two Bills. The
Yep.
Parcells was maybe that's up there too for like a later one
That's a good one. Yeah.
that was really good. The Two Bills with Parcells and Belichick. He also did on HBO the Saban Belichick one.
That was
Like
good.
he's done good ones like Kenny Rogers, but it feels like he really got into, and now we know, like AI, like the like
Yeah.
recreating Al Davis and Pete Rozelle like that. And that was kind of like, I don't know, you can play with that technology in other ways, like just.
Because that could have been, that's so much meat on that bone, man. Like, that would have been
And they gave you
so
some
good.
meat, like the scene with like when the Raiders beat the Eagles in Super Bowl 15, and like they were going to, like the players were ready, depending of what Al signal, they were going to
Ah,
pick up Rozelle and like put him in the
yeah.
shower or something like that. And was that
Yeah.
true or not? That was kind of interesting. Like there were some things that were good, but it was kind of like disappointing.
Yeah. That one broke my heart, to be honest. It didn't break my heart, but um,
Well,
another one,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, not disappointing. This is one that it's a great one for me, and and I watch it periodically too, and it's Unguarded. That one for me. If you ever watch, it's the Chris Herron, documentary where they talked about his life and everything that he went through, man. And it's just personal reasons for me, it's great, but also like the story is just mind blowing. You know what I mean? Like, and that's one for me that's in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah, that's always a great one, and the way that was shot, seeing him speak, and they showing him give his like story to different groups like that.
Yeah,
He's a
that was
player I
cool.
remember, and
Yeah,
what's funny is no one talks about a lot of the clips that they use when he's playing at like Fresno State
Fresno. Yeah,
was like that. ESPN was like the season or something. They were following that team around, so it was like I remember watching that and seeing him and seeing he's like a tough player and stuff like that, and Tark, coaching that team, and then seeing how much Tark loved him like later on and everything. Um, I know that's a special one, and yeah, that's a really good movie too. But I want to get back to the 15 list real quick
yeah,
because
yeah.
I we saw that the U is number one, even over OJ Made America. And I know you like the U, and I do too. But you had an interesting statement you said about the U that I think the people need to hear.
Wait, what statement I made? I can't remember now.
About the list with the U, and should it be a U? Would you have it on there?
I would not have it on there. I
Which
wouldn't.
is big for the top 15. You wouldn't have the U on at all.
No, and it's good, man. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's good, but I wouldn't put that in my top 15. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't put it in my top 15. Like, and even like it's like a two-parter almost, like with the U part two, and that was pretty good too. Like, but I don't know. For me, for it to be number one, like that's I couldn't do that,
I was
Deremy.
shocked when I was watching that special live, and I was like, well, if they're including it, OJ Made America's number one. And when I saw that go to number two, my mind's like, well, what? And I'm like, I knew what I thought. I thought The Last Dance. I was going to get The Last Dance at number one. I'm
Yeah,
like, that's stupid. And then this one, I'm like, The U at number one? I was like, wow. Like,
yeah,
but you went a step further and you said not your top 15, which is like, okay.
yeah. No, I begin again. I'm not like it's really good. Like, but yeah. I can give you a bunch more that I would put on there before that. I'll say this: Brian and the Boz I thought was better than the U.
I like that's a very underrated one. That's one of my favorites. Personally, I thought that was really good. If I'm I would say that's better than the U Part Two, Brian.
Oh
But I
yeah,
would probably
yeah.
say I would take the U Part One, but only by a little bit. Brian the Boss is really good. That's very
It
underrated.
was it was good, and it's like it was a story that I wanted to learn. I mean, I've definitely heard about the Bods and all that, but it was just I wanted to like learn a whole lot more. You know what I'm saying? And I got that watching that, and I was like, man, this is pretty good.
Made me like him a lot more.
Right? Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yep.
Now, let me ask you though, what's something that's not on the top 15 that you're like, you can give a couple, one, there's one big one or a few that you're like, this should be on this list here of top 15.
Oof. Um. Yeah, man. Out of all of them, I I think. Man.
Do you want me to go first or do you, because I have three in particular that I'm like, I think should be on the top 15
I give you
that aren't.
two. I can
Okay.
give you three. I can give you three.
Okay.
I think Unguarded, I think should be on there. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
one that I know you liked a lot, and I liked it too. Benji, I thought was a great story. I thought it was really well done, and I like the 85 Bears one. I think I will put the 85 Bears in there too.
Yeah. I could go to four because I didn't have 85 Bears. I was going, but like, yeah, 85 Bears should be in there. You're right. Benji was one of mine. I think Benji was, man, talk about like a tearjerker. Like,
Yeah, that was tough to watch. Yeah,
yeah, but like just the way they do it and getting the guy who wound up, who shot Ben and killed Benji,
I know.
like that's like great. I don't you call it filmmaking or great investigating to get him to come on camera, but to get that in the story with his his brother talking too, Ben Wilson brother talking. So Benji's a great story. So yeah, Benji. I would say 85 Bears. I got four. I'm gonna go with 979, the Carl Lewis Ben Johnson.
Great, great one.
I think might be the most underrated one of them all. People don't talk
It's great.
about how great that is, and also people don't talk about like the carrot it dangles about like Carl Lewis at the end of it, and like
Yep.
I love how they do that where they're asking, I was like a doctor or somebody like, how can you tell with like steroid use? And he's like, but they have braces in there. And you see a picture of Carl Lewis with braces in his, and I'm like, oh shoot, like
Yeah,
I thought 979 was phenomenal what they did like
it's great.
with that story, and then the fourth one. It it's definitely my top two or three favorites. Requiem for the Big East.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for this. Yeah,
I love that movie. If there's a 30 for 30, you talk about like rewatches. The one I rewatched the most is that
yeah.
one. I
I
watched
knew.
that. Yeah,
I was waiting for this. I was waiting for you to finish, and I was gonna ask you about that. So I'm glad you brought it up.
I think that was just so special, man. And like, man, it just brought back a lot of memories. it does a lot for me, man. So and that's where Ezra Edelman. Well, actually, no, Ezra Edelman came even greater from that movie. He caught my eye with the Ghost of Flatbush, the Brooklyn Dodger thing on
Yes,
HBO. That's when I first heard of him. Was that one? But then when he did this, I'm like, oh, that's the guy who the Brooklyn Dodger one, and he did the Big East one. That was just like so good.
that was a
So
really good. That was a good one too. Nice early on one. I think it was that volume 2. I think it is, and that was good. And I know that's one of your top ones because when we did one of our first episodes when we talked about our 30 for 30s, I thought that was on there. So
no, I love
the
it.
the track stuff I love, man. Like, and I think again, I think some of these get elevated for us because again, it's like personal preference and what we really love. Like one for me because I loved Marion Jones. Like I absolutely loved Marion Jones.
Me too.
She could have pulled up and like, let's go. I'd have been like, I gotta go. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
out of here. See
I'm with
y'all.
you. I know what you mean. I'm with you.
But that one was, man, like I remember when all that came out, man, and I was like, no, not
I was
Marion Jones.
heartbroken. Yeah, that
Dude,
hurt.
yeah, and watching that and like seeing her interview there, I was like, man, like that was pretty cool. I enjoyed that one
Did
too a
that
lot.
make you like her more, or like feel
It's
bad
hard,
for
it's
her?
hard, it's hard for me to like her more than
I'm
I
sorry,
do,
that's the
but
wrong term. Not in that way. I meant
no, 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 I know,
she went from like,
yeah,
yeah, like she's a great like role model. I love like she's obviously she's attractive. I like that, but like great role model. She's gonna be like the next great star.
yeah, and then
And then she fell from grace so bad, and it made me honestly. I flipped on her. I'll be real with you. I was like, man, you disappointed so bad,
yeah,
whatever. And that one was like really weird, where I'm like, I feel like this is to make me empathize with you more,
and
but I
it's
kind of
working, and it's
I'm like,
working.
it's working a little bit more, but I'm like, do I trust you with this? Do I trust
Yeah,
like you're like a victim here? I don't know. That was a weird one for me.
yeah, I get that. 100% I get that. Yeah, she didn't fall like again, like I was freaking totally disappointed, man, in that. And yeah, it definitely knocked her down a little bit. And I don't think this documentary brought her back up for me, you know what I'm saying? Because she did what she did. Like, there's can't come back from that, you know what I'm saying? Like, but that's one, again, a personal preference of mine. That's one I really enjoyed and just kind of like, it was just good to get into and hear all that stuff again.
No, no. So obviously we put it on an even greater pedestal because it's like, how do you compare it? But we talked about how it's insane that OJ Made America is number 2 on this list. But all right, let's say we don't put it be our number 1. And Jose, I mean, if you check our podcast archives from
Check
2020,
that.
we broke down every episode of this doc. It's 5-parter. Like, for those who haven't seen it, or those, because there's been so many documentaries, not just sports, from that came out in 2016. So many docs have come out in the past 8 years, but this one still sticks out, not just for sports, but for all documentaries. This
Yeah.
won the Oscar, best documentary. Just what is, in your opinion, like the impact for you personally, but for documentaries as well, that OJ Made in America made?
It just personally for me, man, like I love what it highlighted. You know what I'm saying? Like and the way that it highlighted it, the way, like, and I'm not going to break the whole thing down here, but
No,
just the
no,
way, like, you know, society elevates people and then for certain reasons, it could be sports, can be a movie, whatever it is, and like how quickly as soon as they do something that society, which obviously he did, but like how quick it's, we're going to rip them down and tear them apart, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just watching that, throughout. Because again, like when OJ was the shit, we weren't even born. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like watching all of that and unfold and how they dove into like each episode. It was just his life, like timeline. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it was just I felt like I know I've seen so much OJ stuff, like so much, and we all have, but this one for me was so different because the it was so much stuff that I learned, you know what I mean, watching that. Like even though everything that I watched, I just like, damn, I did not know that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I did not know that. I did not know that. Like, oh my God, let me research that some more. Like, it just opened my eyes to so much. Not only like with the trial, not only none of that, just the individual. You know what I'm saying? Like, and everything that he went through, and how he became what he became, and is in the way everything just flipped on him. You know what I'm saying? Like, and what he ended up being. You know what I'm saying? Like after all of that, like it's for me personally, man. Like that just it blew my mind how they just laid it all out for us, and it was just like wow, like this story is incredible. How about
No,
you, Danny?
I agree. I think for a topic that for the trial of the century, right? That we had heard, we all like you were around, I was around, so you remember it and what it did, how it was the biggest story. Could you probably of the decade of the '90s, biggest story of a generation? I mean, it's
Yeah,
huge, right? And it's like, well, what can you do with this that's different? And it was brilliant by Ezra Edelman to being like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to talk about the trial, but really, I'm going to talk about the man, and I'm going to point the finger and put the glass on society. Like it puts the glass on OJ, but even as OJ, it's like society, and this is what society led OJ in a way. Like he made choices. I'm not saying there's no self control or no. He didn't like he made those choices on his own, but society set him up to have to think this way, being like, well, how do I make it? You got to like sell out pretty much, and I can't be black. I got to be OJ. Society
right,
put that there. Society embraced that and let a lot of those flaws that hell we didn't know that a lot of people saw these things and turned the other way for a lot of years. It wasn't just random what happened that tragic night in June of '94. It was built up a lot of years. I think about Jose the year before this doc came out, the movie Spotlight, and I love that movie about the Boston Globe reporters like
yes, yes,
finding
yes,
out
yes,
about the Catholic priest scandal and everything. And the one character in it, he's a lawyer who's like trying to go after the Catholic Church, and Stanley Tucci played him. And he gave this line where he said, "Trust me, if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to molest one." And I think about that when I watched OJ, it took a village to create that monster. It
yeah,
wasn't just by himself. And that's what I love about that movie. It shows society like, yeah, when you do this and you build somebody up like that and you put them on the pedestal and you get so amazed with celebrity and all these things and you overlook all this other stuff, that you're creating a monster. And that's what we had here with OJ. And he did a great job on just highlighting all that.
yeah, man, and the difference of like how society can rip you back down, but if you have money, you know what I mean? Like how that changes everything for you still. Even if
Mm-hmm.
society is ripping you down, like you have that money that you're going to be protected. And it interviewed it's just so many people, man. Like it was so great, man. And obviously that's a tragic story. It is tragic story, you know what I mean?
On
But
many
it's still,
levels.
yes, and it's like, and again, they just did an amazing job just breaking it down from the very beginning, you know what I mean? Like until the very, well, not to the end because the end could continue with him, but I, there's no documentary like that. Like people bring up The Last Dance, like you brought it up earlier, like that's nowhere near what OJ Made in America was. Like there's so many other really great documentaries. Nothing to me could touch this because again, the topic was so polarizing, and so it's still big. You know what I mean? Like it's still
Yeah.
huge. It's a huge story. In my lifetime, it's the biggest story ever. I think this P Diddy stuff, and if it made that may be the next one. You know what I mean?
I
Like
don't think your people have said that around me. I don't think it can top it. I think
it won't top it. No.
we need more. I mean, hopefully, is it they'll prove him guilty,
Yeah.
but we need more twists and turns to come out for it to get to that level.
Right. Right.
Like,
It's not there. Yeah. Definitely
yeah,
not.
because OJ had twists and turns.
Yes.
So like, Diddy needs to have more that to get there. Like, if it's just like a straightforward
Yeah.
thing, it'll be a
Yeah. It is
big
nothing.
deal.
Right. It'll
But
go away quickly. This is
yeah.
still not going away, and it never will go away.
Well,
So
hey, we just hit on. Isn't it crazy the 30th anniversary this past June of like the tragic deaths. A couple months before that, OJ passes away, and like
Yep.
that was breaking news. Like, so 30 years later, this is still like breaking news. All the documentaries that came out this past year, for the 30th anniversary, and it's like I don't think for the 35th or 40th it's going to die down. Like this is the
No.
last. It's still going to be big. Like it's just insane, and I just think Ezra Edelman, like, and it's kind of funny because you haven't. I think he's produced stuff. You haven't really seen him
No.
since. And my brother said to me one time, he's like, "What can you do better than that?" And I go, "That's
Right.
true."
Sometimes you just go, that's the one. You know what I mean? Like that's the one. And one thing also that rewatching that as much as I do, like the way he like the way that he pointed out how that changed the media coverage as well. Like it changed a lot of stuff, but that was like the beginning of what we see media is today. And it just did a great job pointing all that out, and interviewing the person in the helicopter. Like it was just like it's nuts, man. Like
Well, I want to ask you this because this is the thing that was like I can't believe 30 for 30 pulled this off. I couldn't believe that they took this on. It was just amazing, right? A big part of 30 for 30 and a big part of OJ Made in America. Forget 30 for 30. OJ Made in America, the interviews, the people they were talking to, right? And that's what blew me away, were all these different people who were lawyers or friends of his or family, whatever, and just how great those clips were, how great, and still thinking
yeah,
about it to this day. How much do you think that was Ezra Edelman's interviewing style, and how much was it that these people just came ready to talk?
it's a little bit of both. I think I think he does a great. I think he holds a great interview. He knows what he. I mean, because when you're creating a document, you know what you want to ask these people to bring it out in the documentary. But I also felt like these people came out, and it's been a long time at that point, and they were just like, man, I'm just gonna let them know. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, and
yeah,
they did not disappoint. You know what I'm saying? Like, and because that's the thing with even with not just OJ Made in America, with a lot of these, well, most of these documentaries that we're talking about there, I mean, it's like we've how many times we've done it on on our episodes where it's like who's the MVP of the documentary, like what I'm saying, like, and it's
right,
like,
right, right.
oh, this person like was a great interview and they gave all the tea and all that stuff, and like it's you always each of these documentaries or most of these documentaries you'll get that one person that you didn't even know was coming, and it's like, oh my God, this person's being interviewed, and you're like, who the hell is his aunt from Mississippi or whatever? And it's like, oh, she was the best interviewer,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
best character in this movie, and it's just those little times too, are like, it's great to get that because you're like, because that's so unexpected.
I tell you the closest thing that I've seen to OJ Made in America, since you mentioned an aunt, it was the Dear
Yes,
Mama Tupac.
that's
That's
where I
probably
got that from.
yeah, that's probably the closest thing I've seen to OJ Made in America. I think Made in America is still number one, but since that's been number two in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
that was so good.
that's what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, like I got to get a character that we both were like, oh my God, and it was Dion, yeah, in that documentary.
And well, yeah, my man Joe Bell and OJ Made in America,
Yes,
like
Joe. I was trying to remember the name,
oh
Joe
yeah,
Bell.
because you know why? OJ Made in America might also be the best trailer I've ever seen too for anything. When he opened with Joe Bell, OJ,
Yeah,
you
the
what you
voice.
done? You messing with the whatever the hands of God. You gonna pay for what you've done, man. And it just gets all deep. I'm like, yo, who is this dude? Joe Bell was an MVP. Joe Bell and
Yeah.
Carl Douglas were like the
Yes,
MVPs.
yes. Carl Douglas was great too on that.
So man, I just think, but then it's like they went downhill pretty soon. Like there was a few, but I feel like that was like they hit their peak and then very quickly it went
Yeah,
downhill after that.
yeah. It's been rough, and I'm to the point now with that expectation that I was talking about earlier and getting disappointed. I'm not even that it doesn't even happen to me anymore because now I'm just like, you look at season or volume 4, the Rodman one was, you know, the Vic one, like I already know the story, like in and out. Like, we talked about B Water, Long Gone Summer was disappointing. The Al Davis one we talked about was disappointing. The Tuck Rule was disappointing.
Yeah.
Dream On, the Greatest Mixtape was all right. Bullies of Baltimore was very disappointing because that was a great topic that they could have done a lot with, and they dropped the ball on a lot of that stuff. You know, what was like not too long ago that came out, which was pretty decent, I thought. Maybe, but I'm also probably lowering my standards at this point. But the Great Heisman Race of '97, I thought I like that. I was like, man, like I forgot about that, and I was like, that's not bad. But I think I'm also lowering my
Yeah, it was
standard at this
okay.
point.
It was okay. I remember. Yeah, it was all right. Um, what about this though? I'll give maybe a counter argument that we've seen a boom since 30 for 30 came out. Hell, we could say even since Made in America, there's been a big boom in documentaries in general, but definitely
Outside of ESPN.
yes,
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 yes.
yes.
Okay.
And also sports documentaries.
Right.
HBO got back into the game and
Yep.
tried to compete. And then Netflix and a lot of athletes are producing their own things. Do you think that's had an impact on 30 for 30 or not really?
Well, I
Or
mean,
the quality of it, I should
right.
say.
I think I think they've been so much better than the 30 for 30s that I think it's definitely hurting the 30 for 30 series. Like those Untolds on Netflix are pretty good. You know what I
Yeah, they're
mean?
really
Like
good, yeah.
that's been a good series. Again, hitting a lot of topics that they're really cool topics that people don't talk about anymore. And so I think like we have more of like volume where we can go to, where it was like before it was just like pretty much just these 30 for 30s. Now it's like you mentioned, like everybody's doing them and they've been pretty good. So I'm okay with 30 for 30s like suffering a little bit, but it's a shame, man, because when I see these, we talk about it here all the time, where it's like, oh, like they just dropped the list of 30 for 30s coming out. Like, what are you excited to watch? And it's like you get to that point and it's like the American Gladiators one was like, I was excited to watch that. I don't know why, but
I
that
would
wasn't that
too.
good. That wasn't that good, and I don't know. I just think it's run its course, you know what I'm saying, maybe. And but to your point, I think other factors have come in where there's been so many other really good documentaries where it's just now like whatever. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch this 30 for 30, but I'm probably not gonna like it.
Well, I think it definitely made they brought in a lot of competition from their success, right? And that meant
Absolutely.
that like you couldn't just coast. You have to step it up. I do think that's not the factor though, as far as why they've gone down. I think that's why like we really notice that they've gone down is because I'm like,
Yes.
man, there's so many other ones. But I do think losing people who really cared about it,
Yeah.
and I think you could bring in other people who do, but whatever they're not bringing it like the way those original people did. I think that's a big deal, and I think ESPN kind of did a shift over the past like
I,
2010s.
I was gonna say this. Yeah. Go
You
ahead.
know, when you had like John Skipper running it, and he wanted more diverse stories being told. He wanted more on-air talent. He wanted just to be different. He liked the written word. And then when he left, and then they went through a lot of controversy, they kind of focused back on just the sports, like the
Yeah.
live sports, and you get like Stephen A. and McAfee, and I feel like their focus goes there. And 30 for 30, and this has really died out and has just suffered, and that's a shame.
That's what I was gonna say too, Deremy. I mean, that's a great point. Like, I think this network itself, like I think it's like a microcosm of like ESPN overall. Like I think in the last 10, 15 years, ESPN is really suffering. You know what I mean? Like, and I think this is just a small part of that, and just, yeah, to your point, I think, yeah, it's just all sports and a couple of people. I think it's like Mike Greenberg, Stephen A. Smith, and McAfee. Like, and it's just like we're gonna revolve around these three guys. They're gonna live in ESPN. studios and they can't go anywhere and they're just going to do every show. And it's just, I think the product is really bad. And I think this is just I'm trying to say, like, I, the whole product is bad. So this is obviously going to suffer too, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a shame.
I think that's just what bothers me with it. It's like what something that you always heard that ESPN did was they didn't like individuals and they would kind of like ESPN it up. If something like stood out of nowhere, ESPN to get their hands on it. And if you listen to like the Origins podcast, they were doing that from 30 for 30 from the start. Once it got some success, ESPN mucked it up and tried to get into it. I mean, if you look at it, right, like volume like one kind of goes into like 30 for 30s and it goes to like ESPN Films Presents.
Yeah.
And that's because another group within ESPN competed with Bill Clinton. They wanted their own thing instead of like just letting, and like you already have a known brand. So, and this is the thing though, we and you always say we're not in those positions, but when you do certain things that are so stupid that I'm like, I'm not a business guy, even I know that's dumb. If I have a successful brand, 30 for 30, I'm going to allow these people, we're going to make our own movies. We're going to call them ESPN Films Presents. And it's like, but you have 30 for 30 that people want. And guess what, right?
Yeah.
Look at that list. The Fab Five. What do people call it? A 30 for 30. It's on
Yep.
the top 15 list. No one says the best ESPN film presents Fab
Yeah.
Five. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, no one does that. But only ESPN can muck it up like that. And then what happened after that? Well, we're going to go to volume 2. There should never have been that. So, like, when you have stupid people doing that from within and you're allowing that, it's amazing that it lasted as long as it did, giving us good stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I don't think it's going to last that much longer, to be
No,
honest. Like,
I think you're
again,
right.
I think the shift like you mentioned there, I mean, I think that was such a great point. I think the shift in the entire network, I think they're going to start doing away with some of this stuff and going to more of like, what they're doing now. It's like, they did that. I think Stephen A. Smith produced it. I think the one I had sent you before, like when they talked about like all the broadcasters and stuff like that were on ESPN, like
Oh, right.
I thought they could have done such a good job when they talked about like the start of like PTI and stuff like that. Like, but that's what they're doing. Like they're doing little things like that, and it's still involving the same people. Where it's just like when people fans of ESPN see that, and it's just like I'm tired of these people, man. Like I need something different, and they're not giving you that. And I just think again, like I don't know how much longer these 30 for 30s are going to last. I don't know if producers are going to want to do them 30 for 30s when they can go somewhere else like Netflix or HBO or Showtime, another great documentary
True.
catalog,
Right.
man, but I haven't got a good Showtime one in a long time. So,
Me neither.
so it's like, what's next?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's a good point. You know what? Like the Steve, because that was true. That Stephen A. one could have been really good about like the history of like, you know, hot take sports media
Yeah.
and stuff. But you know what? They're all starting to feel like E60 segments, not
Yes.
movies.
Yes.
Like it's like I'm watching of like, is this E60? It's like, oh no, it's a
And they've had a couple
documentary.
good ones. The
But
E60 ones. They had the Mighty Ducks one I thought was decent. It was
but those
entertaining.
aren't movies to me
No,
though.
no, they're not. They're like segments and shit.
Yeah, but there's a little bit longer, but they're not like if I watched the Mighty Ducks one compared to like the two Escobars,
Yeah, no, like
like the two Escobars could be played in theaters.
yes,
I ain't
yes.
going to see no that Mighty Ducks one in no theaters. Like I'm not.
And that wasn't even
That barely deserves to
promoted.
be on my phone.
Yeah, they
You know.
weren't even promoted. They did the Avalanche Red Wings episode. Like
Mm-hmm.
that should have been like they could have promoted that so much, and they don't even do that anyway. That's what I mean. Like they barely promote these things where it's just like, oh, this is coming out. I didn't even know that. Like
We did more promotion for the Jesse Washington one than his
yes,
own network did. We had him on talking about it. What's that? The culture or no? What is it
the
called?
culture. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, he came on our podcast. Check, look at the podcast. Look at the YouTube channel. He
absolutely.
talked to
Check them.
us. That was a surprise. I think you were homesick or something like that. and that's how you discovered it, and you sent it
Yeah,
to me. I'm like, yo, I heard nothing about this.
yeah, yeah. It was a shame because it was good too, and like it, it seems like what I feel like is that they don't care. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think it's coming across like that. Watching it, like they just don't really give a shit, and the product is not good, and it feels like just overall, like it's just they're just doing something, like you
But
know what I mean, like
right,
just doing stuff.
but you know what gets me is ESPN has started a 30 for 30 podcast some years ago. That's how much successful this was. They're like, we got to do shorts. They had the shorts were
Yeah,
good, and they had a podcast, right? And that fell off. They had some really good podcast like ones, but you know what trips me out? What I think one of the last good ones they had was the Sterling Affairs, where like Ramona Shelburne did it. We're talking about the Donald, it's like a 4 or 5 part thing on like Donald Sterling and all that controversy with him getting outed and what happened. And look at that came out a few years ago. What came out this summer? FX did a show based on called Clipped. Now the show sucked, but
yeah.
what's it based off of? The 30 for 30 podcast series that she did, which I'm like, the podcast series is way better than the TV show,
I'm sure.
and
Yeah,
she got a producer cred on it. Like she got a lot. Appeared in it, and I'm like, we if you see, but you listen to her in that series, you can hear and feel the effort that she put into it. And look at the result. And I'm not saying every result's going to give you an Oscar or a Peabody, or you're going to get a show on FX or something. But when you do have that effort, people still want this type of storytelling it shows. But
yeah,
why are you going away from it?
yeah. And they've gone away from it for sure. And it's a shame. And yeah, those FX ones with like the Aaron Hernandez one I haven't watched. I don't like the ones with the actors. I'm not a big fan of those, but people keep telling me that Aaron Hernandez one is pretty good. Um, but yeah, like, and this is such a shame, man. Like, I love sports documentaries so much, and for me, when I rewatch them, I go to the originals, like the first 60, let's just say, and that's a shame, man. You know what I mean? Like, I hate that, but that's where I'm at with these 30 for 30s. As much as I love these episodes that we were talking about and these movies, man, like I'm just like, all right, I'm glad I have them there in that catalog. I'll check them out periodically.
You know what it's going to take, right? It's going to take, they have to lose one of these. Right now, the NFL is still big. You can't lose that. In
Nah,
the NBA, they kind of getting caught, but like, they're going back to the live sport. But once they lose one of those contract, like, they're not getting them as much,
yeah,
because you have to fill content somehow, and
yep,
that's what these did and have done for so long. When there was like a delay in something, or it was a dead time, nothing happened in sports. What you see, 30 for 30 marathon on ESPN or ESPN2, like you need to fill that content somehow. And I think right now you're filling it up with McAfee and Stephen A. and Greeny, and however you feel about them, they're game changers. Those guys have been
yeah,
around
yeah, yeah,
and stuff like that. But I think eventually, like, it wears out, or you don't want to pay them,
right.
and then you got to fill content, and let's see what they can do. But I think that's how it can change to get back. But until then, we're going to get subpar stuff.
Yeah, I'm not confident that when that time comes, like they're equipped to even like handle that number one, but number two, like give us more great content. I think it's done. I think ESPN is holding on barely. I know they got all the sports, and I know they got the football, college football, and all that, but and I love that they got hockey again, but everything else is like, ugh.
Yeah. So, but this is fun to look back on, man,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
to see, and no matter how I feel about it now, I got to say big up and congrats for 15 years,
yep,
because that's impressive, and they've changed the game, and we're at a golden age of documentaries, and I think a big part of that, arguably, I could make a case of maybe the biggest part, in my opinion, is because of 30 for 30.
yeah. I think HBO docs like birthed it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the baby daddy, I guess. And but these here, man, this is this changed documentaries. I felt like even like
Mm-hmm.
not just sports documentaries.
Absolutely.
I think documentaries overall, and this a lot of these episodes that we talked about, which are near and dear to us, there and me, man. Like I think it changed television, overall. And I'm just glad we still have them. You know what I'm saying? Like that we can always go back to and watch them because I'll do that. And I know you do too. And I know a lot of people do. Like every once in a while, I'm sitting there and I'm not doing nothing. Like tonight, if the World Series wasn't on, I would have watched one of these, And
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I have that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and hopefully things change. And again, I know Netflix is coming out with a bunch of stuff. Hopefully Showtime drops a few things, but I'll watch those too. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going anywhere for sure when it comes to these
No,
documentaries.
absolutely. Let's be real. For this YouTube channel or the podcast originally, probably maybe the biggest influence for us to do this
Yep.
were 30 for 30.
Yep.
So I'm appreciative of that because like that was like when you and I talked about it, it's like, man, people want to hear these stories. Look at 30 for 30. Let's go do this. So if anything, I can't knock it, even if I'm disappointed in the past few
Yeah.
years,
I'm never gonna knock it. Yeah.
because look at what it inspired in us. So I appreciate that. So, but this was fun. Please listen, and you can check our archives on our YouTube channel, Bigger Than a Game with Deremy and Jose. You can check our archives for our podcast with Bigger Than a Game with Deremy and Jose. You can listen to all the old episodes and all that. And we got more great content coming for you. So please just tell all your friends, like, subscribe, spread the word, man. Bigger Than a Game with Deremy and Jose. That's where you want to hear sports history. We connect the past to the present. So for my main man, Mr. Jose Ruiz, I'm Deremy Dove. Thank you guys for watching.
Peace.